One of President Trump's campaign promises was to, quote, drain the swamp in Washington. He said he would be the people's champion, all while putting together the wealthiest cabinet in U.S. history. It includes the former CEO of ExxonMobil, a 20-year veteran of the United States Senate, and a former Secretary of Labor and wife of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. In his new book, Captured, Democratic Senator from Rhode Island, Sheldon Whitehouse describes what he sees as corporate influence in American politics, and he joins me now. Good to see you, Senator.
Good to be with you. Thanks for having me in.
So you've said in this book that, and you've said also publicly, you've never seen the kind of influence from corporations in our elections before the 2016 election. What happened?
Citizens United, more than anything else. That decision just opened the floodgates for corporate money to pour into elections. And what the Supreme Court didn't pay attention to is the fact that if you allow a special interest to spend unlimited amounts of money, you've necessarily allowed them to threaten to spend unlimited amounts of money. And if we all saw the spending and knew who it was, that might be one thing. But the threats or the promises to spend were never going to be visible. And that shadow from the big special interests who prove that they're willing to spend has really darkened Congress.
And what of the fact that President Trump said that he was going to drain the swamp and is now filling some key positions, not only in his cabinet, but in his administration with some of the wealthiest people? Hillary Clinton was, using the president's tweet words there, sad.
Sad indeed.
Hillary Clinton was lambasted for speeches that she made to Wall Street.
Yeah,
Wall Street
she makes a speech to Goldman Sachs, and he lambasts her, and then he puts a Goldman Sachs guy in charge of Treasury. It's been disappointing because, during his campaign, there was a Donald Trump out there that we could have worked with and whose disruptive presence might have been really good for democracy, taking out the carried interest exception that helps the big Wall Street barons pay lower taxes than their doorman, breaking up the pharma pricing regime that allows them to charge us higher prices than anybody else in the world, doing something big at last on infrastructure. But all of that has disappeared, and what we've seen has been special interests, and in many cases the worst special interest in the area, actually given the keys to the head office in the regulatory agency.
And I guess that's the question. I mean, in this book, it's sort of eye-opening because when you lay out everything that encompasses the 2016 election and even beyond, it sort of makes sense when you say, okay, this and then this and then this. It's very different when you're hearing pieces, bits and pieces.
I try in the book to pull it together as best I can. And the way that it relates to Trump, I think, is that on the one hand, I think a lot of the frustration that Americans felt that led them to vote for Bernie or for Trump has to do with this problem.
Right.
That government is actually responding to big special interests and not to human beings any longer. And that anger gets him in, and now he's such a kind of meteoric character with the tweets and the noise and the crazy things that he says that it's very easy for America to be distracted by what's going on in the Oval Office and not pay attention to this continuing encroachment through all the branches, through the regulatory agencies, through elections of this corporate power.
Certainly, there are many, many Americans who sometimes believe that government regulations can sometimes strangle entrepreneurial spirits. And yet, when you read and you hear that the administration is rolling back, for example, some regulations that were put into place after the collapse of 2008, which brought us to the brink of, some say, a massive recession. Some of those regulations are put in place to protect Americans.
Yes.
Others are certainly there that create a lot of red tape and a lot of headaches for people. Where's the fine line? Where's the balance, I guess?
I think regulation has a really important role. We don't have people killed in boiler explosions because we regulated boilers. And we have a really powerful pharmaceutical industry that is world-renowned because we don't allow people to sell stuff that they made in their kitchen or their basement without having gone through a process to prove that it actually works. So I think that's important. They can get stale, they can get old, they can get clunky. But here's my experience. The Republicans talk a really good game on regulatory reform and on how regulation strangles new businesses. But every time in Congress we see a regulatory reform effort, it's for the big polluters and it's for Wall Street. over and over again. So it's like rolling in the circus cart with the big curtain over it that says regulatory reform, but you pull back the curtain and it's the same Dobermans. It's Wall Street and the polluters virtually every time. So, and these last three congressional review acts that they did, guess what? Wall Street and the big polluters.
Really fascinating stuff. All right, so let's talk about a couple of other things here. You went to the Munich conference
Yes.
over the weekend. What did you make of the vice president's comments that the United States will hold Russia accountable?
It was very necessary that he say that. I think President Trump has created a lot of dismay in a lot of different quarters, but one of the places where he's created a lot of dismay is in Europe. In the countries that are in the shadow of Russia, that see Russia manipulating their politics all the time, that see the NATO organizations threatened by Russia militarily, that see Russian spies and mischief and funds everywhere. So they really are anxious about Russia. And to see this guy so entwined with Russia and looking like he's going to throw them under the bus really sent off a lot of alarms. So it was really vital for the vice president to go over there and make it absolutely clear, as did the Secretary of Defense, Secretary Mattis. We are with you. We value the transatlantic alliance. We value NATO, and we are not going to let you down. He had to say it really clearly, and thank goodness he did. And thank goodness we had about a dozen bipartisan senators over there saying the same thing, amplifying the message. We are there. We are not going away. And if this guy tries to do something like that, there's going to be a lot of congressional pushback.
But then you have somebody, the foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, saying that he'd like to see a I'm paraphrasing. Yeah, a post-Westworld, as I'm paraphrasing what he said here. But in other words, a world where the NATO is perhaps not as relevant or as significant as it's been in the past, one presumably where Russia is ascendant.
Well, the thing about that is that there's still people in Europe who remember the difference between what life was like in the Soviet sphere controlled by Russia behind the Iron Curtain and what life was like in free Europe, where America and the Marshall Plan had rebuilt Europe. That difference has not gone away, and the notion that Russia is now going to exert more power there creates justifiable fear in people, because the last time Russia had that kind of power, they used it to basically drop the Iron Curtain and treat people as slaves behind their authoritarian communist regime. Folks remember.
Earlier this month, you and Senator Lindsey Graham, you both introduced into the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Crime and Terrorism the investigation into Russian efforts to influence elections. Where does that investigation stand right now?
We have our first hearing scheduled mid-March. The chairman will make the decisions. I'm his ranking member, not the chairman, but I do expect that we're going to do kind of a scene setter hearing, for starters, to basically display the toolbox that Russians use around the world to try to manipulate elections, and then compare that to what U.S. laws would permit or would forbid.
Are you also looking into the allegations around General Flynn's discussions with the Russian ambassador, or the fact that President Trump's lawyer may have put together a plan for Ukraine, for the Crimea, with regards to Russia, that he then brought to General Flynn?
We want to understand all of that, and we want to sort out the allegations from the facts. And as we do, we'll try to make them clear to the American public.
Are you finding it easy with your Senate Republican colleagues to get this going?
There has been a lot of pushback, but thankfully, Lindsey is very courageous and he's very patriotic, and he served this country in uniform most of his life. So he doesn't have any interest in protecting a president who would be making side deals with Russia and who may have business interests or political interests or compromat or whatever it is that would potentially make him vulnerable to Russian pressure. And so I'm very confident about what we're able to do with him as the chairman.
Here's a question, I guess, that a lot of Americans will have, which is, are some Republicans willing to let things go the way that they have because they have an ambitious agenda, one that many Americans agree with. They want to pass tax reform. They want to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. They have these President Trump has nominated Judge Gorsuch to be the next Supreme Court justice, the Associate Justice. That's something that the Republicans want to see happen. There's a lot of things that they want to accomplish, and they feel that they can get those things accomplished if for the moment, they let the president go on tweeting. You let the president tweet about NATO, and then you send Vice President Pence to talk to the allies and calm them down, or you send General Kelly to do that.
Because there's nothing resembling a Republican plan to do repeal and replace, and because they're completely snarled up on tax reform, there's really nothing to be done on those areas until they've sorted themselves out. And there's really no immediate path towards them getting themselves sorted out. So once they get through the nominees and once they get through the Gorsuch hearings and the vote, I don't know quite what they want to do quite next. I do think that there are a lot of Republicans who are very anxious about what Donald Trump means politically for them, politically for their party, and also, frankly, for the country, the kind of trouble he could get us into. So there's a very significant skepticism about this president. On the other hand, they're also Republicans, and therefore they're going to go home and they're going to face Trump voters. So they've got to be careful about putting him under the bus and alienating his voters until there's a real smoking gun, until there is real blood in the water. Pick your metaphor. But I do think that if there is a smoking gun found, if there is enough blood in the water, there will be no partisan hesitation on the part of Senate Republicans to clear out whatever the problem is, because there's very little love for this figure and considerable anxiety.
All right, we'll have to see how it all breaks down. The book is Captured: the corporate infiltration of American democracy. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, thanks for stopping by.
Good being with you.
Thank you.